is Thursday, the 4th of May, 2017, and you're listening to Skeptics with a K, the podcast for science, reason, and critical thinking. Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptic Society, a non-profit organisation for the promotion of scientific skepticism on Merseyside, around the UK, and internationally. I'm your host, Mike Hall. With me today is Marsh.
Hello.
And Alice.
Hello.
So it was Easter.
It was Easter.
We had an Easter. Did you guys have a nice Easter?
Did I have an Easter? I
I
didn't
don't
notice
remember
Easter.
what I did for Easter.
No?
That feels a while ago now.
I definitely worked on the Friday.
You ended up working on Good Friday.
Have we not done an episode since then?
Yeah, but I got us an Easter egg. And I forgot to bring it. So obviously I got us a Karamak.
You got a Karamak Easter egg?
Well, it's got Rolos
it's got
in,
Rolos in.
And munchies. I'll have the munchies. I don't like Karamaks. I've never tried a Karamak.
You're having Karamak. This is going to be a taste sensation.
Last time we ate on air, it went down really well.
Yeah, we should
they
eat the
loved
Rolos
that.
or
They
the
bloody
munchies
loved
because
it.
they're crunchy.
But so here's a Karamak.
Okay.
It's the golden creamy bar.
That weighs roughly the amount of sugar I'd expect in some drinks.
I mean, it's
By and large, it's about that much.
I agree. Alice, you want the munchies,
I like
don't you?
munchies.
And so, yeah, it's a Karamak. So there's two Karamaks in this.
I haven't had Rolos in ages because my wife boycotts Nestle.
Right,
So we
okay.
don't have any Nestle things in the house.
Well, there's many Nestle things on the table right now.
I know, and
There
Nicola's
is.
not having any of them.
Including a Karamak. So I'm going to eat a square of Karamak because it's the golden creamy bar.
Is that the whole slogan? The golden creamy bar.
Well, that was their advert in the 90s.
But it sounds like it's the golden creamy bar that
No, it's just the
doesn't fill
golden
you up.
creamy
You know,
bar.
like that's okay to eat between meals or whatever.
And then I had a bit about wet lettuce, which was
Wet lettuce?
yeah, on the advert for Karamak in the 90s.
What?
There's people at home now going, fucking hell, I remember that ad. And you guys just going, what?
No
and
idea.
Alice going, I wasn't even born then.
What year was it, sorry?
Actually, you would have been born, but it would have been mid-90s, so you'd have been...
I think Alice should try some Karamak.
I don't want to.
I think you should try a little square of Karamak. A half square of Karamak for the show.
But it's going to be really sickly and sweet.
The now
don't really
legendary
like very
Skeptics
sweet
with a
things.
K chocolate.
It smells horrible.
It does smell horrible.
It is very, very sweet as well, Karamak.
I had a birthday.
You did have a
It was
birthday.
good. We went out for my birthday. That was nice. Had quite a busy weekend because we went out on the Friday night, which was my actual birthday, for my actual birthday, for drinks. And then on Saturday, we went to Speak Hall,
Speak all.
We did go to Speak Hall.
Tried-
I've totally forgot about all of this.
which I'd never been to before, so that was really nice. And Tom brought his little baby Rosalind, who is
Yes.
super cute and
She's super
super
cute.
intelligent, and learnt all our names, including calling me Dr. Alice, which was the most adorable thing ever.
Did you
how old
sing the
is she?
Dr.
She's
Alice
like-
song?
She didn't sing the song.
She didn't sing the Dr. Alice song, but she did keep repeatedly going Dr. Alice, like she was about to.
She's like 2, isn't she?
She's 2. She's just a bit
so
over
smart.
2. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
she's so
very,
smart.
very smart. So that was good. And then on Saturday night, we went to see a gig of a band from Manchester that I really like.
We went to see Pins.
And
Pins.
Pins.
They have a song with Iggy Pop. Does that mean anything to Iggy Pop?
I mean, I know of Iggy Pop, but mostly because I
that's
used to know a guy who looked like Iggy Pop, so we called him Iggy Pop.
But if you didn't know who Iggy Pop was, that's a reference lost on you. Did your friend who looked like Iggy Pop, did he wear like transparent trousers and nothing else?
No.
Iggy Pop would do that.
Would he?
Has done that. Done entire gigs wearing nothing but see-through plastic trousers. Cock out and all.
I've seen there's a thing. There's a thing of transparent jeans is apparently a thing.
Are they jeans?
Jeans, they're jeans with transparent knees.
Okay, that's different.
They've got a cutout on the knee, and then they've got like transparent
plastic sheeting.
Why?
Not just a
knee.
hole in the knee.
Because
Yeah.
it
Like
is a thing, though,
plastic sheeting.
there's loads of girls walking around in jeans with like massive holes in
Yeah.
them, like they've been moth-eaten by giant denim moths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But these ones have gone one step further to go like, well, I want that look, but I don't want my knees to be chilly. I don't, it looks a bit
I think
breezy.
the problem is you have the opposite of chilly knees. You then get sticky, horrible.
You will get sweaty knees, yeah.
Yeah, you might get sweaty knees. What if it's a well-ventilated plastic? Like you get the stuff you put on top of kiwi fruit, or you know,
I
get the
know-
sort of
yeah,
the
I know the kind of stuff.
semi-perforated,
Yeah.
like plastic,
Yeah.
like ceramic.
But then you'd have kind of
But then
smoky knees. You wouldn't want kind of cloudy knee. Cloudy knee
you don't want a
effect.
cloudy knee.
Nobody in fashion is looking for the cloudy knee look.
Well, yet this could be
It could come.
forging
It
the
could
new
happen.
year.
It could happen.
Women's fashion is amazing. There are some very bizarre things that you can buy. Everything's covered in ruffles at the minute. There's ruffles and flares,
Not even sure I know
flared
what a ruffle is.
sleeves.
A ruffle was also a 90s chocolate bar.
It was a 90s chocolate bar. I was
was.
just thinking, did it have coconut in it? And
It
maybe
was-
some sort of raspberry thing.
It was raspberry flavoured coconut and it was covered in plain chocolate.
Yeah, I remember
And that's
ruffles.
what all the women are wearing these days.
all of their clothes just covered in ruffles. Rather than covered in Raffles, who was the gentleman burglar, wasn't he?
Oh dear. Are we going to keep making obscure pop culture references on this show? Is this...
Specifically to the early 90s.
Yeah.
Just out of Alice's reach. Just tantalisingly
excluding
beyond
me.
Alice's reach. So you've got clothes that are covered in Raffles, the gentleman burglar.
That was an aside. That wasn't part of my story. Mike randomly brought up
Iggy
jeans
Pop
with
pins. We're back. It's fine. Iggy Pop pins, we're all fine. Pins are good.
pins. Were good. I really liked pins.
We were in like a garage.
Apart from there was a really annoying couple right in front of us who had
Marsha Nicola.
I was behind Alice.
who decided that they were going to stand like very, very close to my face and then talk to each other so that all I could see was the side of their face. That was really annoying. And were completely oblivious despite the fact that I was like very obviously right there and staring right at them because I was like, I'm going to prove a point. I'm going to keep staring at you rather than trying to get around you.
It was a weird place as well because it was near Strangeways Prison in Manchester.
It was.
And it was
down a weird little back alley.
Down a weird back alley with just like strewn furniture around.
Right.
And then you get to it and it is a garage in the sense of it's got the roll-up door. And then you go in, and it's no bigger than maybe a 2-car garage or a 3-car. Well, it's a garage that people would have used to sort of like a mechanic's garage, to actually like work on, to operate on cars. I was going to say to do operations on cars.
Operate on a car.
I'm a very hands-on kind of guy.
Yeah.
I've been hammering stuff recently. I'm basically a DIY legend at this point. I know exactly all the right terminology. They are operating on cars, but even to the point where you've got the trench dug out of the concrete, the pit, I believe it's called, for you to get underneath the car, and they use that as a bar. So the barman was like just a head, the barman, the bar lady, just a head in the ground.
So the bar staff were just,
head and shoulders
sticking out.
Nothing else.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like being served by Holly from Red Dwarf.
So did you enjoy pins? Was
They
it
were
good?
good. I really enjoyed it, aside from the really annoying people there, but it was good. I liked it. And then on Sunday, we played a new board game. I got a board game for Christmas, a Panda Bear board game.
It's a Panda
That was
Bear board
good.
game.
There's a Panda Bear
How can there
board
be a Panda
game.
Bear board game? Panda Bear board game.
You're supposed to grow bamboo, so you get little plastic bamboo shoots, and then you need to feed the panda the bamboo.
Grow bamboo and refuse to have sex. Is that what the Panda board game
Well,
is?
I mean, during that board game, we all grew bamboo and none of us had
None of us
sex.
had sex.
So we accomplished that perfectly, frankly.
Tick.
Yeah, 2 ticks there.
So
That was good, that game.
That was quite a good game. It's called Takenoko, a Japanese board game with a panda.
We've also played another of your new board games.
We did. We played then later in the week. I also got from Laurie and Karen, who for some reason I've taken to calling Lauren and Carrie lately, which is getting really annoying. Laurie and Karen.
Oh, not doing it deliberately.
Not deliberately, no, accidentally.
No, I thought you were doing it to wind them up. But no, okay.
It's just a bit of a tongue twister. They bought me a Buffy the Vampire Slayer board game.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
I mean, it's an amazing board game. Like, all the board game art is really good, and it's like you play in Sunnydale, in lots of different locations in Sunnydale.
Hellsmouth Cafe.
Yes.
Hellsmouth
Hazelnut Cafe's there.
It's really fucking complicated. It's the most complicated game I think I've ever played.
I mean, you explaining the rules nearly made me cry. I was like, what are you on about? What tome? What are you talking about? Symbols? What widgets? What's going on? Why are there demons? Why aren't we seeing any demons?
How do we kill a demon? Because you can stun a demon or kill a demon.
Yeah.
Then the demons come back. Obviously, they're demons. And yeah, it's really, really,
Three
really
different
complicated.
layers of bad guy in it.
Yeah.
It's like, there's vampires knocking about.
There's vampires and demons.
But then there's like,
There's a monster
like
of the week.
a nasty bad guy, and then you kill him. Oh, but there's an even bigger bad guy.
And then there's the big bad.
The big bad. That's standard Buffy shit.
Yeah.
So the full aim of the game is to kill the big bad, but the big bad doesn't come into play until you've killed more than 3 monsters of the week and picked up the clues from the Monsters of the Week that reveal plot cards of the big bad that you then have to defeat by matching glyphs.
I think someone has adhered a little too closely to the Buffy formula of season-long arcs with Monster of the Week.
I think someone's enjoyed the idea of putting a lot of the monsters in, but not really enjoyed the idea of much of the gameplay. Because the gameplay itself largely whittled down to pick up 2 cards. Do these match the symbols on this thing? No. All right, well, you didn't win. Next. And that's basically the majority of the game after that. But it was
unnecessarily complicated.
It was more complicated than a game that I played the other day, which was Twilight Struggle, which is a 2-player game about the Cold War, where one of you plays as USA and one of you plays as USSR.
It's not Twilight Struggle as in a spin-off of the vampire sparkly thing, not that.
Not the sparkly one. But no, that's really, really good. I won't go into it because we are way into the introduction.
I mean, we are. But I'm mostly stringing this one out because we've had some listener feedback recently from people saying they really hate us going on about our lives in the intro.
Really?
So I have more of that.
I'm trying to string that one out a little bit, just
that complaint recently.
Because what I like to do basically is troll our listeners.
Yes, yeah.
Is what it's about.
I mean, they're probably switched off by now.
They probably have, or fast forwarded, or just gone off and want to listen to Skeptics Guide instead.
Yeah.
A little while ago, we talked on the show about a concerning case in the local media about a young man raising money to get treatment for his cancer abroad. We talked about how it was reported by the local media and that we thought it was reported irresponsibly, and we talked about how we had written a letter to the local newspaper co-signed by a lot of cancer researchers in the area. That letter was published by the newspaper, but it seemed they hadn't changed their policy much when a few days later they reported another story about a cancer patient raising money for chemotherapy at a specialist German clinic. I don't really like to talk about specific cancer cases if it can be avoided, and the particular case isn't relevant here, but it was particularly interesting because on the face of it, the story looked fairly legitimate. The fundraising was in order to do some chemotherapy, which is a reasonable treatment for cancer. But I was a bit suspicious from the article too, so I went off to investigate who the specialist German clinic was. I suspect we might talk about this clinic in particular sometime in the not too distant future.
I think I know which clinic it is, Alice, and I think I know where you found this story, Alice.
No, it's not where I found that story. I found the story on my own.
Oh, on your own, okay.
I sent this ages ago. So I'm not going to go into the clinic much now, but safe to say that the website looks fairly clean and professional and straightforward. They offer a range of complementary therapies, but some of the ones they use are genuine treatments, including one called immunotherapy. And I wanted to talk about immunotherapy because it's quite interesting in some ways. I first came across the term when looking at proponents of alternative therapies and therefore was quite suspicious of it. From an alternative therapy perspective, it sounds great. Immunotherapy is the targeting of the body's immune system, enabling it to fight off cancer. It's just the sort of thing that alternative therapists
they all latch onto that kind of thing. Yeah.
But the water is a bit muddy because actually immunotherapy is used by oncologists in treating cancer patients. It's an overarching term which applies to a whole range of treatments, including Herceptin, which we've discussed before. It's a case of encouraging the immune system to recognise and attack cancer cells in the body on its own. So Herceptin is an antibody against a protein that is frequently increased in breast cancer. The antibody does an important job by binding to that protein in the cancer cells, which means that the immune system can see the cancer cell. It targets the cancer cell over your normal healthy cells because the cancer cell has tons and tons of this protein on its surface. And so it activates your immune system to direct it specifically targeting the cancer cells in the body.
So it acts as like a marker. It's like hanging a lamp on it and saying, come and get
it.
Come and get it. It's all over here. Yeah.
Hanging a lamp on it?
Hang a lamp on it, yeah.
What do you mean hang a lamp on it?
That's not a thing. It's a web developer term.
No, it isn't.
It is.
Hang a lamp on it.
Hang a lamp on it, yeah.
What's that from?
If you've got a piece of really clunky user interface...
You hang a lamp on it.
And you can't figure out a way to...
You light it up so people can see it.
To unclunk it. What you do is you hang a lamp on it, you draw an awful lot of attention to it instead, and turn it into a feature instead of trying to fight against the clunkiness of this bit of UI. Hang a lamp on it.
Hang a lamp on it makes no sense. What's the etymology of that idiom? Where'd that come from?
You want to draw attention to something?
You don't hang lamps on it.
Hang a lamp on it, you fucking spot it a mile off.
You point a spotlight at it. But with the spotlight isn't on the thing. The spotlight's from a distance pointing at the thing.
You can repoint a spotlight.
What if it's a desk lamp? You hang a lamp on it.
What if it's a desk lamp?
Hang a lamp on it, the desk lamp's going to be pointing somewhere else.
No, it's going to be it's more like a lantern kind of light.
Hang a lantern on it.
Like an oil lantern or a pumpkin lantern, if you want to go that way.
So this is a web developer term based on oil lanterns and jack-o'-lanterns.
Yeah, we've got to have some sort of meat space culture that we identify with.
If it's based on a jack-o'-lantern, I would say the jack-o'-lantern itself would obscure the thing, because if you want to draw attention to something, you don't put a jack-o'-lantern on it because everyone's going to go, look at the jack-o'-lantern.
And not look at
I've seen pumpkins as lanterns before. I could not tell you what surface they were on or what was next to them.
What happens when we go to the shitty displays at Light Night? We see a lot of stuff with lanterns hanging off them, and you can spot them a mile off.
Yeah, but that just means they're shit.
And that's exactly the point.
So you go back around to this. Okay, so the cancer is shit, so you hang a lantern on it. People might think it's part of the lantern parade at Light Night. Yeah. And the Herceptin will rush in going, oh, this looks like it'll be disappointing.
Yeah, exactly right.
Gotcha.
And that's how we treat cancer.
There are no flaws in this metaphor.
The only flaw in this metaphor is if people haven't listened to the maybe 4 or 5 episodes in which we've ever mentioned Light Night and talked about what is involved in Light Night, you need that level of not just hyper-local, but also hyper-local time-specific information for this to make any sense.
We're going to be talking about Light Night in the next couple of episodes, though, because it's coming up soon.
That is true. That's a throw forward. That idiom is a throw forward to a story we might possibly tell you in a bit.
Throw forward, that's a drink. Yeah. Oh, that's a throwback.
Oh. Does that make are we even now? If we
I don't remember what the rules were.
I think it's 2 drinks.
Yeah.
If you do a throw forward and a throw back.
Can we do a throw side? Is there something that's a throw side?
Mandela effect, isn't it? It's the episodes of this show that happened in parallel universes that people remember but never actually went out.
I think a throw aside,
like my TV license story.
I went looking for that the other day because someone didn't believe me about the TV detective hands, and I could only tell them some of the half-formed memories that I still have of it, and they were like, yeah, that sounds total bollocks. Like, well, it does when I say it, but it was really convincing when he said it. But it doesn't even exist, so I can't even point them to it.
Oh.
I think a throw aside is when we refer to something that's on Be Reasonable or Incredulous.
You think?
Yeah, and if they refer back, it's throwing it back again.
So, the very serious story about cancer.
Sorry, yes, cancer, Herceptin, throwing lamps on things.
I'm done with Herceptin for now. Another example of immunotherapy is one that's been in the media quite a lot recently. It's sometimes referred to as PDL1 or PD1, which isn't a name of a treatment that I have gotten from your list. Really, that's not the name of the therapy. It's a name of 2 proteins, PDL1 or protein death ligand 1.
Death ligand?
Yeah.
I'm fairly sure they were in Buffy.
Yeah, they were, the Death Ligands.
Monster of the Week in season 6, the Death Ligands. It was.
Yeah, they were sort of slightly schmoozy, would hang around, freeloading from various different places, and then kill you.
Protein death ligand 1 is a protein that's usually involved in suppressing the immune system during pregnancy. It's recently been shown that overexpression of this protein can occur in cancer. So cancer cells are specifically suppressing your immune system so that they can hide and hang out in your body for longer.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that's not a conscious thing because cancer cells don't have consciousness, despite what some pseudoscientists have told us in the past.
Have they told us that?
Yeah.
Oh, they did. That was right. Yes. Okay, good.
Cancer has malintent. So there's new therapies that look to inhibit PDL1 and prevent it from binding to its receptor, PD1. Ligands just is a thing that binds to a receptor. And so...
Isn't PD1 what Puff Daddy's now calling himself? I'm not even sure if he's still about.
I have no idea.
No, there was a thing recently where he was on an awards show.
Wasn't he in a film recently?
He got bored and lay down.
I did see
on the
this.
steps
to be fair, I do that at QED quite a bit, lie down at the back.
So to be fair, you get bored and lie down halfway through the podcast. Some episodes.
He lay down on the stairs, and so, of course, the internet then photoshopped him lying down in many various places. Because it's not just us who likes trolling people.
Like planking. Have you heard of planking?
Yes, I'm aware of planking. In fact, I have plunk on that very chair you're sitting on, Alex.
Is it plunk or plinked?
I plank, you plank.
I do plank.
He, she planks. They plunk.
They have plunk.
Yes,
they planked or they have plunked.
They have plunked.
It's the difference in the perfect and imperfect tense.
So this allows T cells in the blood to grow and you get more active immune system because you've gotten rid of the protein that's suppressing the immune system. It allows the T cells within the immune system to grow and you get a more active immune system which allows it to target the cancer cells.
And this is the legit therapy.
Therapy, yeah.
Yeah.
There's another cool type of immunotherapy that's in clinical trials at the moment called CAR T-cell therapy.
Okay.
It's super cool. Basically, you take some immune cells from the patient's blood, you take the T cells, and you genetically modify them so that they're producing a protein called chimeric antigen receptor, or CAR. The CAR is specifically designed to recognize an antigen that the cancer cell is expressing, something that is specific to that cancer cell. Then you grow up loads of these CAR T cells in the lab and use them to treat the patient. Because they originally came from the patient's own immune system, they are recognized as part of the immune system. And with the modified CAR on the surface, the cells are basically engineered to recognize cancer cells and only cancer cells, flagging the cancer cells to your immune system, and your body can then fight off the cancer.
So their whole raison d'etre is to attack these cancer cells. That's all they exist for.
Yep.
But they know they're existing to do that. It's kind of Cartesian logic. That's a good cricket noise, Mike. How long have you been able to do that?
Many years.
What?
I do like to throw these things out just when people are least expecting them.
How do you learn to do a cricket? That's a good... I mean, Alice is amazed by that cricket noise.
That's amazing.
Happens.
I don't think I can do the noise of any insect.
No?
But that's in fairness, that's the only insect that makes the noise. There's not another noise, is there?
No.
Daddy longlegs make a noise when they fly into things.
Yeah, that's more like kind of a bouncing off flapping stuff.
That's why I hate them.
Yeah, they're
I
all right.
know. If you listen to a wasp carefully, it's got a foul mouth on it.
Bees, in fairness, bees do make a noise, famously so. What bees and wasps make they buzz.
Buzz.
They buzz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The CAR T-cell therapy is also being used in types of leukemia where blood cells known as B cells are cancerous. The CAR T-cells can be used to wipe out all B cells in the blood, including the healthy ones, before the patients get a bone marrow transplant, allowing the replacement of the cancerous cells with healthy cells, and then the bone marrow gets to work producing more B cells. So you're basically replacing all of your B cells in the patient with non-mutant B cells, non-cancerous B cells. Teaching the immune system to recognize a cancer cell is a really helpful way to treat cancer. It's using our body's own resources in lots of different ways, and there's lots of different types of therapy to recognize and target cancer. But there's a real problem that it's being used to refer to anything that apparently boosts the immune system. Plenty of alternative therapists will explain to patients that certain changes or treatments make their immune system better. I think I've seen it referred to as in Gerson therapy, that if you eat healthily, then you're going to have a better immune system. That's not an immunotherapy, but I can see a case where alternative therapists might refer to it as a form of immunotherapy.
Yeah, you do see that absolutely loads. The majority of the ones who say that they're curing cancer, unless they're burning your face off with Black Salve, they'll typically say, well, we're trying to put your body in the best position so that it can heal itself, so that your immune system can take over.
The problem is, because it is a real therapy, because immunotherapy is used by science and is effective, if they're then referred to as immunotherapy, it confers a certain legitimacy to those treatments. It makes it difficult to pin down which is the alternative therapy and which is the true therapy.
Sure.
Especially since when you Google the term immunotherapy, it brings up Cancer Research UK's page on immunotherapy and lots and lots of other kind of really good explanations of what real immunotherapy is. If somebody says, oh, somebody's offering me immunotherapy, I'm going to Google that and sees it's real science, it's true, it works, then they're more likely to agree that might be something that they want to try.
Yeah.
Case in point, it's taken me a reasonable amount of digging to figure out the difference between alternative immunotherapy and immunotherapy, and I'm a full-time cancer researcher. I should definitely know this. I think we need to be careful about terminology in general, but one thing I think is really important is that we have an idea of what alternative therapists really mean when they offer a treatment. I've seen a lot of cancer clinics refer to immunotherapy without explaining what it means, including that one in Germany. It just kind of has it as a sentence, has it as a statement, doesn't explain what it is, what the treatment is, what that actually means. It's just a term that is used as a catch-all, and it is a catch-all in science. It's used to kind of explain. It's an umbrella term for lots of different types of therapies.
I think I've also seen some clinics using that term, and they probably do mean it as immunotherapy in the conventional sense, but they're offering that alongside, like they're offering the slimmest part of that kind of immunotherapy, but they're offering it alongside a lot of others. So they'll say, well, we'll set up your body so that you have a system of Herceptin, but we'll inject this Herceptin in a certain way that runs through meridian line stuff. Or it's kind of like, we will prepare your body for the Herceptin by doing this cleanse, this enema, this thing. And then the Herceptin is only a small kind of part.
Yeah, I suspect that's definitely true. And I have seen a number of clinics who will say, oh, well, we're going to use this particular chemotherapeutic agent, and it's clear that that's just a very tiny element. And they might not even be using that in all of the patients that they see. They just want to say that they've done it once.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
Immunotherapy is just a term that means to support the immune system in cancer treatment. It isn't an accurate way to refer to a specific treatment, and we need to be in the habit of asking what these terms really mean. It's easy to change language to legitimize a treatment. And I think it's important to understand what that language means. And to be clear to ourselves, when we talk about treatments, it's tempting to look for catch-alls, and we kind of have some of them when it comes to things like homeopathy. We know that there's nothing in it. We can say anytime we see that word, it's most likely bollocks. But there's lots of things in alternative therapy that are questionable, that could possibly be true in the right context. And we need to kind of have a clarity to understand when it's true and when it could be true and when we need to ask these questions to understand.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff like chelation therapy, which is actually very useful in very specific circumstances of extreme heavy metal poisoning.
Yeah.
But they offer it as a way of curing autism, and it's not going to do that. I wonder if whether the way you talk about immunotherapy is kind of put me in mind almost of something rather than chemotherapy, which I guess is sort of itself a bucket of stuff. It's chemical-based therapy. Immunotherapy is kind of immune system-y based therapy, which has all these kind of different things, and lots of it legit, lots of it not legit. I wonder if it's more like the way we talk about physiotherapy is maybe the way you should be thinking about it, is whether as to what, because there's so many different things that can be part of physiotherapy, and some of them more legitimate than others, some with better evidence than others. Maybe that's the way we should be thinking about immunotherapy, is that it's that catch-all term for a specific area, the details of which, once you're in that, are up for kind of grabs, really.
And I think that's the important thing, is that we need to understand where there's a lack of clarity and where we can ask for more clarity. I think that's a thing that sometimes we forget as skeptics, that a thing we should be doing is asking questions, is kind of trying to get our head around what somebody actually means. A lot of us can get into a position of saying, well, that's just bollocks. We just know that's bollocks. But actually asking those questions and trying to understand what a person means, understand where the misleading terminology might well mislead us.
So a few weeks ago, I got an email from a listener called Ant.
Ant?
Not from Ant and Dec. I mean, actually, I don't know.
Might be
Might
Ant.
well be.
May well have been.
That had to be impressive. Not Ant as in an ant. It wasn't a listener who was an ant.
Not as far as I'm aware, or even an aunt.
Or an aunt.
Neither of those things.
I mean, I hope it wasn't.
Ant is one of my A's. When I can't sleep, I think of animals of each letter of the alphabet, and I have ant and anteater.
You don't go for aardvark?
I go for aardvark.
Classically the first of the A's.
Aardvark, armadillo, ant, anteater.
Albatross.
Alligator. There's a lot of. I've got a lot of A's because I always start with A's and
Makes
I add
sense.
more
You
and
would,
more.
wouldn't you? That makes sense.
And then I usually fall asleep by M or N, so I have less when it gets to later down the alphabet.
If it was an ant, you've got to question how he's managed to send the email.
They work together, don't they, ants? It could be lots and lots of ants.
But this is an ant. It's from an ant, not from.
Well, maybe
like,
there's one's vocalised and composed. They've all worked together
it's
to type it out.
It's an email with a lead author, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got an email from
it might just be a guy whose name is Ant et al. Or it's just a guy whose name is Ant, who we've just spent the last couple of minutes taking the piss at. And it's a perffically normal name.
Perfectly reasonable name.
I think we're just in a bit of a silly mood today.
It's all Caramac. We're Caramac adjacent. I'm going to go for another bit of Caramac. I don't like the fucking stuff.
It's the golden creamy bar.
It's the golden creamy bar.
Andrew was referring me to an article on Science-Based Medicine about the placebo effect, titled "Placebo, Are You There?" ? The article is an English translation of an article published in the French journal Science A Pseudoscience.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah, I've heard the story. I heard the article.
I don't think science is pronounced that way in French.
Presumably Science A Pseudoscience.
Yeah, good.
And it was posted by former QED speaker Harriet Hall, with permission from the original French author, who was Jean Brissonnet, who I've mentioned on the show briefly in passing before. I don't intend on examining this article in depth, but it opens with an interesting anecdote which the article claims describes a genuine conversation. The scene takes place in a surgical suite where they are preparing to do a cataract operation. The patient is lying on the operating table. A few minutes earlier, the anaesthetic gel was applied to the cornea to permit an operation under simple local anaesthesia. The surgeon arrives in the company of an anaesthetist. They are engaged in a spirited discussion and don't seem to be agreeing. It has been proven, said the surgeon, that 30% of the action of a medical treatment is due to the placebo effect. I doubt that, retorted the anaesthetist. I think the placebo story is one of those medical myths on par with the idea that we only use 10% of our brain and that nails and hair grow after death, or that cell phones create interference in hospitals. I didn't know that one was a myth. I thought the cell phones did create interference. I might just be a full-on woo now.
I thought that was bollocks, but it's probably good to keep your phone at least on silent.
It's just polite, if nothing else.
It disturbs people, yeah.
I've got a feeling it might be geographically bound depending on what bands they're using, because I know that there was a point when mobile phones would interfere with the equipment on an airplane, but it was only certain types of mobile phones.
With the avionics, and that's not so much of a big deal anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know whether it's a similar kind of deal, basically.
Interesting. But
it's probably fine in a GP waiting room, though.
Yeah, it certainly is.
It's also definitely true that your fingernails and toenails don't grow after your death. It's the skin regresses.
Retracting.
Although in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, which I mentioned last episode that I saw, he points out that they pass on that canard because they're idiots. He says that your fingernails grow after your death, while on the other hand, your toenails don't grow at all. He says because every time I notice my
toenails on your hand.
Well, exactly. That's he said. On the other hand, your toenails. No, and he goes on. But he says,
I see.
He says, because every time I notice my fingernails, I know they need to be cut. But I don't remember ever cutting my toenails, which I assume means they never need cut, or I must just cut them without realising.
What?
Yeah, it's a weird play.
That's ridiculous.
It's a weird play.
So anyway, I think this is the anaesthetist talking. Says, I think the placebo story is one of those medical myths. No, insists the surgeon with a superior tone. The fact is established and has been proven by numerous studies. The anaesthetist shakes his head with a slight smile, but he doesn't reply. As for the patient, who might have much to say on the subject, he keeps quiet because it would not be prudent to argue with someone who's about to suck the lens out of your eye.
Very true. Although more prudent if they're going to use an implement to do it. Also, I wonder whether it is true that 30% of what surgeons are absolutely certain about, it turns out not to be true. I wonder if that's actually the case. I think you're absolutely certain. I'm not going to look it up. I know this full well.
The paper goes on to say that this anecdote would not be very interesting, except that it betrays a lack of understanding of the placebo effect within the medical profession. This faith in an all-powerful, magical and mysterious placebo effect is common amongst the general public, the paper says. And they're not wrong. You search Twitter for placebo effect, as I did the other day, just as a rough yardstick for public opinion, and you'll find comments like, placebo effect, if you believe it will heal you, it probably will. The placebo effect is real, you can heal yourself with your mind. And pseudoscientific, unverifiable claims for products will no doubt have some placebo effect and thusly be justified.
Yeah, I got an email today from someone whose wife has Parkinson's disease, and he's very annoyed with us for the stance we're taking on the Charity Commission, because he said, well, even if there's no evidence for it, the act of looking for something will put you in a positive psychological point and you'll bring on a placebo effect that can help. And therefore my wife's Parkinson's will be cured by whatever she chooses. And the glandular fever that my daughter got, his point was, his daughter was in an accident and got burned at one point, and therefore started getting glandular fever, which can only be cured by a dose of homeopathy, and in a couple of days she's fine again. Whenever she gets like a glandular fever outbreak.
Glandular fever just goes away on its own. It's a pain in the arse, but it's not even very contagious, glandular fever.
Yeah. And I don't think it's got a lot to do with being burnt in an accident, but I imagine that's what the homeopath said. I can see that. I could imagine how that consultation went. So tell me about your medical history. Oh, I hear you were in an accident. Okay, that means I'll have to use this particular homeopathic remedy. Yeah.
But moreover, the anecdote about the surgeon demonstrates the notion of a powerful placebo effect persists within the medical profession itself, and this is a problem. And it's a problem to have the acceptance of placebo as a clinically relevant intervention so widespread in the medical community. Just a few days ago, I read an article in the Smithsonian titled "Why I Take Fake Pills" about a professor of psychology giving open-label placebo, so that's placebos where you tell them it's a placebo, to a journalist who was struggling with writer's block and anxiety. They spend time choosing the right colour because colours influence the power of the placebo. They elect to use a capsule rather than a pill because capsules are reported to have a larger placebo effect. They order a batch of pills to be made up at the cost of a few $100s. When the journalist balks at the price, the psychologist reminds him, quote, the price increases the sense of value, it will make them work better. They talk about the importance of the ritual of handing over the pills, and overall the article describes the most blatant display of cargo cult medicine I've ever seen outside of straight-up quackery. But this is how the public views the placebo effect, and it's how more members of the medical profession than anyone should be comfortable with views the placebo effect. Part of the issue we're faced with here, I think, is the heterogeneous nature of the placebo effect. 100 milligrams of morphine is 100 milligrams of morphine, no matter what the study is. But the effects measured in the placebo arms of clinical trials are the aggregate effects of the unique pattern of non-specific effects in that particular study, or even in that particular group in that particular study, especially if the blinding is shot to hell. This means that the placebo data are not comparable to other placebo data in any meaningful sense, which makes a nonsense of a good fraction of the literature on the placebo effect. It reminds me very much of what you were just talking about, Alice, where immunotherapy means different things in different contexts. Yeah. And some of the things might be legitimate and some of the things might be bogus, but we talk about it as if it's one thing.
Yeah.
It also means that when you see studies which claim things like placebos work even when they're open label, well, placebos aren't just one thing. The data labeled placebo describes a different thing in every single study. It is a unique pattern of biases, statistical regressions, classical conditioning, anchoring, and so on, unique to that study and not something that is necessarily going to be replicable and certainly not reliably replicable outside the context of that study. But even the medical community gets confused by the fact that we call this massive non-specific control data placebo, despite it describing different things in different studies. And they look at these data and fail to remember that these exist as controls for non-specific effects, not as an alternative intervention. And as tall as those bar charts are, and as tempting as it might be to believe it, the effect seen in placebo arms of clinical trials is unreliable, by definition non-specific, possibly illusory, and is not something that you're going to reproduce by feeding lactose to your patients. This figure of 30%, which was mentioned by the surgeon, is the commonly accepted figure for the magnitude of the placebo effect, and it's a figure that we've mentioned on the show before. But where does this figure come from?
We're going to do it, are we?
We're going to talk about this figure.
I'm never sure which ones we've done or not, because you talk to me about some other ones occasionally, and then you present on some other ones at other places, and I'm never sure which studies we have covered and which claims we haven't covered.
Who knows where it's going? I know where it's going.
You do know where it's going.
So Henry Beecher. Henry Beecher was an army surgeon during World War II, and as the story goes, one day he ran out of morphine. We've
all been there. We have all been there.
And so, for whatever reason, he started giving wounded soldiers saline, saltwater injections instead. And he reported that, to his surprise, they responded as if they'd been given real morphine.
I wonder if during the 90s anyone ever made the pun Mighty Morphine Power Rangers. Just a load of them sort of like lazing around, sort of dribbling, unable to move, just like collapsed. They should have done.
Following the war, Beecher wrote a paper titled The Powerful Placebo, which was published in JAMA in 1955. The paper became extremely influential and remains the single most cited source on the placebo effect in the medical literature.
So far, but this show's going to overtake it.
From the paper, 15 illustrative studies have been chosen at random involving 1,082 patients. Placebos are found to have an average significant effectiveness of 35.2 plus or minus 2.2%, a degree not widely recognised.
So we've actually been undercutting the placebo. It's actually 35.
35 plus or minus 2.2%.
5% more placebos out there to get.
This is where the 30% figure comes from, and a replication of this study on that was conducted a few years later. It comes from this Beecher's estimate of 35% plus or minus 2.2%. But what does that even mean? What does a 30% placebo effect mean? Does it mean 30% of patients, 30% of a measured effect? And how does Beecher even actually come to that figure? As mentioned, Beecher effectively analysed 15 studies and concluded that across these studies there was a 35% effect for placebo. He defined this as 35% of patients had their condition improved by placebo alone. So 35% of patients in the placebo arm showed improvement.
What were the studies that he pulled, sorry? What kind of things? I
will come to the studies in a second. But that's where the 30 or 35% figure is coming from, is that the number of patients improved by placebo is not 30% of the effect, it's 35% of the patients.
So arguably, it could be said that 35% of people will improve. So even at best from his kind of studies, even though we're going to delve into them and find out they're all bollocks probably, the most that you could say is that sort of 1 in 3 people will feel something the other 2 in 3 won't.
Yes,
by his numbers.
that seems to be the case.
That's another interpretation of it.
And the studies were on various different conditions. There was a study on coughs. There were several studies on post-operative wound pain. There was a study on the common cold. Which 15 studies he used and why those studies were selected, I thought was very interesting. From the paper, he says, this is not a select group. All studies examined that presented adequate data were included. Now, that sounds great. All the studies he looked at, if they had adequate data, were included.
Define adequate?
Presumably, and I'm making this up because I'm steel manning him a little bit here. Presumably, if they presented sufficient data for him to be able to analyse.
Okay, so not that this was a well-controlled study. It's adequate in the sense that there was a control wing, there was enough people to be statistically significant.
Well, maybe not that latter one, because there's several of these have got quite low numbers of patients in them. But it doesn't say which studies he examined, only that all the ones he examined he included if they had sufficient data, and that the studies were selected at random.
So he just picked 15?
By what method he picked 15, this paper does not say, although I am less persuaded by his claim of randomness when I read on and discovered that of the 15 papers examined, 7 of them were authored or co-authored by Henry Beecher.
Gotcha. So he's like, well, I'm already halfway there. I'll just pick a few more to sort of pad it out a bit.
Yeah. So 7 of his 15 studies, he was the author on, or he was the co-author.
And the good thing is, I mean, presumably had those 7 studies all showed there was no placebo effect, he still would have undertook this exercise and still would have included them, I'm sure.
So that's alarm bells ringing off about selection bias in Henry Beecher's original analysis and what other flaws might be lurking in there. So with a lot of help from Alice and with a little bit of help from Twitter, I was able to track down...
No help from me.
All 15 original studies.
You managed to get the one I couldn't get?
I managed to get the one you couldn't get eventually as well, yeah. Some of these studies date from as far back as 1933. Now, that is a lot of studies, and I can't spend like the rest of the show going through each of these 15 studies individually.
Although I bet you've gone through all of them, haven't you?
I have read through all of them, yes.
Yeah, but we haven't got time for you to go through them all now because we spent so long at the start referencing 90s chocolate bars.
That's true. I mean, I like to ruffle.
I still miss a Cadbury's Marble. That's early 2000s.
Cadbury's Marble is all right.
I think it's one of the great chocolate bars.
I quite like Aspira.
Aspira?
Aspira.
Aspira?
Yeah, it was like
a
twirl, but it was like a chunky twirl. So it had quite big. It had like about 8 holes in it. Aspira completely, and it kind of twirled all the way down. It was nice. Aspira. I liked Aspira.
I liked a Dream.
I did like a Dream as well.
But they're a bit... I don't think I'd want one now. I think they're probably too sweet now. They were.
I find Milky Way is way too sweet.
I quite like Milky Way.
Milky Way now, it's way too sweet. But you only ever get them in the tiny
That's
ones.
because they're really sweet, so you've got to have a small one.
Yeah.
But while I was researching these papers, I spent an awful lot of time plugging the titles of papers into Google, plugging PubMed references into Google, trying to see if I could find whether someone has linked this paper. Sci-Hub was fucking brilliant. It got me most of the way there, which was awesome. But I also identified, because it kept coming up in my searches, a 1997 reanalysis of Beecher's original 15 papers, which obviously that analysis cites the papers, so it kept turning up every time I was searching for the papers.
Gotcha. And this is 1997. This was New Labour. A new analysis swept out all the old dead wood. The last time analysis was great in this country.
Things can only get better.
Yes.
But the 1997 reanalysis I found fascinating. This paper was titled The Powerful Placebo Fact or Fiction and was published in the Journal of Clinical Epidemiology. In the paper, the authors enumerate a number of things which could give a false impression of a placebo effect, many of which will be familiar to listeners of this show. So let's have a quick look at these. First, they talk about spontaneous improvement, that is, patients who were just going to get better anyway. The paper says that the 1997 paper says spontaneous improvement of a disease does not occur as a result of placebo administration. It is not an effective placebo. This often seems to be disregarded in the placebo literature. And I'd have to agree. This is often a major component of a reported placebo effect, of that aggregate of non-specific data that we see in the placebo arms of clinical trials, despite it being something which would have happened anyway with or without the placebo administration. It's useful to measure it as part of the placebo wing of our clinical trials, because the point of placebo wing in trials is to measure those non-specific effects, measure the effect of everything other than our active intervention, so we can subtract that from the final tally. But when we start to mistake the effect for an alternative intervention instead of a control, people still fall into that trap today. It's why Daniel Moorman's comparison of 4 pills to 2 pills to treat gastric ulcers is misguided and useless as a comparison. It's why people look at the knee surgery study and instead of concluding that the knee operation in question is useless, they conclude that the operation is so amazing it even works when you fake it. One of the papers cited in Beecher's powerful placebo is titled The Medicinal Treatment of the Common Cold, published in 1933. Beecher looks at the patients in the study whose colds improved after taking a placebo and then ascribes that recovery to the placebo effect, completely failing to take into account the fact that colds get better after a few days anyway. And according to the 1997 paper, this sort of mistake, this failure to account for spontaneous improvement, is present in 10 of the 15 studies which Beecher cites in his original paper.
Jesus.
Regression to the mean is another one that we bring up on this show. In chronic conditions, symptoms will fluctuate over time. Good days will follow bad days, will follow good days, and so on, which means that any trial investigating a chronic condition will always have some patients seeming to improve. During this study, you will see some patients getting better and some patients getting worse, but often they aren't recorded as such. They're recorded as some patients improving and some patients not improving. And a deterioration in the patient's condition is not recorded, only the absence of an improvement. Therefore, some percentage of patients will appear to have improved following the administration of placebo, even though just as many patients got worse because the placebo had nothing to do with it. It's just statistical regression.
So it's up or not up, basically.
Yes. Or worse than that, there are studies where some patients in the placebo group improve and that's ascribed to the placebo effect, or some of them deteriorate and they say it's the nocebo effect. They're having side effects.
Yeah.
It's side effects from taking a nocebo. The placebo effect literally cannot lose in those kind of in those kind of studies, and this is all exacerbated by a self-selection bias stemming from the fact that patients don't go to help from their doctor when they're having a good day. They go when they're having a bad day. They go when their symptoms are at their worst. So in many cases, patients are more likely to improve in the short term than not, because the day you got enrolled in the trial, your symptoms were at a low
on the way
ebb.
down. Yeah.
So Beecher ascribes to the placebo effect improvements seen in 5 of his 15 papers without any account for statistical regression. So 5 of the 15 papers take no account of the fact that statistical regression is a thing and statistical regression would have affected those particular papers. Again, this is commonplace in research on the placebo effect. They rarely account for regression to the mean. Unrecorded parallel interventions also account for some of the effects seen in placebo. We talked about this recently when I pointed out that patients receiving antibiotics for other conditions might recover faster from gastric ulcers, but this is unlikely to be recorded in the data because at the time the study was done, we didn't know that ulcers were caused by a bacteria. In 2 of Beecher's 15 studies, patients were receiving other active interventions alongside the placebo. So the effects observed in the placebo wings cannot simply be ascribed to the placebo effect, which is what Beecher does. Patients improve in the placebo wing, therefore it was the placebo that did it. There is also misquotation. So in one paper Beecher cites, which is Gravenstein et al. 1954, on which Beecher is a co-author, this was a study on coughs. Beecher cites 36% of 22 patients were improved by placebo in one aspect of the study, and 43% of 22 patients were improved by placebo in another aspect of the study. When you read the study, there are no groups of 22 patients, and there is no effect listed as 36% or 43%. I can't find these figures anywhere in the paper.
Jeez.
Now, because Beecher was a co-author on the study, maybe he's citing from raw data that we don't have access to.
But he should have fucking published that to cite it.
But it's not in the paper he's quoting from.
Yeah.
It's not in the paper that he claims to be quoting from. Not only that, but the paper itself says this, and I should remind you that this paper was co-authored by Henry Beecher. It says, it is not possible to answer the question as to how effective placebos may be in diminishing cough frequency or in producing a satisfactory subjective response, since we were not able to study our sick patients for a period of days without any medication. In the present situation, it is impossible to estimate how effective the placebo may have been in producing a desirable subjective response. So the paper says, we don't know how big an effect placebo has, but Beecher cites that paper and says 36% of 22 patients improved on placebo.
Jesus Christ.
And nevertheless, Beecher still ascribes to placebo improvements purported to be in this study, and the numbers he cites are not even in this paper. From the 1997 paper, they say Beecher misquotes 10 of the 15 trials listed in the powerful placebo. Sometimes he inflates the percentage or the number of patients, or he cites as a percentage of patients something which in the original publications is referring to something completely different, such as the number of pills given, or the percentage of days treated, or the amount of gas applied in an experimental setting, or the frequency of coughs after irritating a patient. In fact, of the 15 papers which Beecher cites in the powerful placebo, none of them demonstrate a convincing effect for placebo which could not be explained by a means other than a real therapeutic placebo effect. They could all be explained by spontaneous improvement, regression to the mean, misquotation, unrecorded parallel interventions, reporting bias, etc. Frankly, Beecher's analysis, which is still the single most cited, most widely cited, probably the most influential paper in the medical literature on the placebo effect, his analysis is complete garbage, and he has completely misread the 15 papers which he cites, even though he wrote 7 of them. What's worse is that these same errors are still being made in the modern literature, which mistakes a correlation, the fact that the patient took a pill and improved, for causation, that the improvement was prompted by the pill.
I've got 2 things before we carry on. One, I'm just having this Carmack bar. On the back it says 1 bar equals 1 serving, so even it knows that a Carmack is the standard unit of measurement for anything. And also I noticed on the front of the Carmack box, not a Carmack egg.
No, it's not a Carmack egg.
It's just a chocolate egg.
Just a regular
it's not
chocolate
even a Carmack egg.
You never had an Easter egg before. Easter eggs are they're always just a plain milk chocolate egg.
I know, but Carmack is just a flavoured chocolate. It's like you get a dark chocolate box, and this is dark chocolate special, and it got a load of dark chocolates in there, and then the egg's milk chocolate. You'd expect it to be dark chocolate, or like a white chocolate box. You open
It's
the
not
egg.
a Caramac collection, it's a caramel collection.
It's very clearly looking to be Carmack, though.
It's quite Carmack branded.
It's the Carmack fucking branding. It's red with yellow and almost the same font. Anyway, that's one thing. The other thing, I've got a very quick story before we go into listener questions, and it just kind of speaks to the value of taking that little act of activism when you can. It's something I always try and talk about quite often. If you see the opportunity to do even something that seems like it might be relatively small, it's always worth doing it because you don't know what's going to happen. A little while ago, I happened to be kind of prompted by a conversation to have a look on eBay for Black Salve. And we talked about Black Salve plenty of times on the show. It's the kind of archetypal nasty stuffs when it comes to alternative cancer cures. The thing that I say, don't Google Black Salve. And then often listeners go off and Google Black Salve and then regret Googling Black Salve.
Yeah, never Google Black Salve.
Never Google Black Salve. Well, I spotted that you can buy it on eBay, which we're already kind of aware of. And one of the things that we've been doing with Good Thinking for a little while is trying to make complaints about things like Black Salve or MMS or stuff like that when it's on eBay, when it's on Amazon, to get them to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And what we normally find is that you complain to Amazon about a listing for Black Salve, and they'll take that down and say, thank you very much. And the next day, 5 other Black Salve ones have gone up. And because the way Amazon works is it's reactive rather than proactive, which means effectively it's not active. There is no active regulation there, in my opinion. But I noticed that Black Salve was being sold on eBay, and I spotted, actually, weirdly enough, the thing that caught my eye is that the address of the person selling it was actually in Southport, which is in Merseyside. So I thought, where the hell is this guy selling Black Salve from in Merseyside?
He's on our pitch.
Yeah, he's on our pitch. We'll have a little bit look at this. So I had a little bit of a look, and I thought, well, I can't. It didn't seem like he had his own shop, but you could buy it online, have it delivered from eBay, and it was about a £10 or something like that. And then I noticed that eBay has a partnership with Sainsbury's, who own Argos as well, so it's a supermarket chain and high street chain, which allows you to have products delivered through a click and collect mechanism to one of their stores.
I see.
So it struck me that you could buy this incredibly dangerous, effectively controlled substance that's banned in several countries and is not legal for sale in the UK because there's no medical license for it. You could buy that from eBay and have it delivered to Argos, one of the most recognised brands in high street retail, and then pop along to your local Argos and pick up this incredibly dangerous stuff which will burn holes in your flesh from your local Argos. So that's what I did. So one day I made the order and got a little message through. And then one day, actually the day after we'd been doing the psychic testing that I spoke about on this show previously, the same day I popped along to my Argos and I got my Black Salve. and photos of me kind of going into Argos, getting it and things like that. And it's for starters, I mean, I brought it to Skeptics in the pub, and I kind of gave you both had like a look at it and a sniff it. What's your...
I had a little sniff of it. It sounds I mean, it sounds awful as well. It kind
awful,
of squeals. Yeah. It's like the thing. It smells kind of fucking potent as well, and it looks scary, and
it's not something I'd want to start sticking on my skin. And the thing is, I know what it does, which is kind of why. So having this story in hand, it struck me that if I was to speak to one of our journalist friends who we work with occasionally at Good Thinking, this is now suddenly quite an interesting story. From having this is a dangerous substance we all know about and it's available to buy online, doesn't really have the kind of angle that would get a newspaper interested. But once you throw in there and that it's in partnership with Sainsbury's, one of the biggest supermarket chains, and Argos, one of the biggest high street chains, that suddenly gets an angle on a story that you think the newspapers would be interested in. So we pitched that to newspapers. Lo and behold, a couple of weeks ago, it was front page of the Times. There was a little box. It wasn't the main front page, but there was a little box there talking about this dangerous cancer cure. Go into page 11 where the whole story was, and there's a nice big article there all about it. So that's quite nice regardless. And then you look on eBay a couple of days later and there are no listings for Black Salve. And I checked during the course of this recording, there are still no listings for Black Salve. And so it seems like this, just having seen on a whim that Black Salve was available on eBay and deciding to buy it and documenting the whole journey of me buying it and keeping all that stuff together, and then knowing how to approach a newspaper with that to say, here's an angle in the story that might be quite interesting. We managed to not just get good coverage for Good Thinking, but also seemingly get Black Salve banned from eBay as best we can tell, or certainly there's no listings on there at the moment, which is great because it means the next people who've got cancer who go looking for Black Salve on there aren't going to find it. So it's a bit of a skeptical win, and I just thought that's quite a nice story to kind of illustrate how you can take just that one, spending a tenner and literally 2 minutes on eBay to buy the product, can end up in this position if you can sort of follow things through and see where it goes, and hopefully we've done some good there.
Awesome.
This is a question from Mason in Chicago. And I know that Mason's in Chicago because he opens his email by saying, hello from Chicago. So I'm very good at looking for evidence and piecing logic together in those kind of ways.
He might not currently be in Chicago. He might have only been in Chicago when he sent the email.
If he was in Chicago at the time, he might be dead by now. Their murder rate's really high. Like really, really high. He says, hello from Chicago. I'm a long-time listener of Skeptics with a K, but have a terrible memory. So if you've covered this already, a pointer would be excellent. He asks, you've all taken on a lot of medical research papers and clinical trial reports on your show. I'll hold my hand up. Not strictly true. I don't think I've done a lot of medical research papers and clinical trials.
You've done a couple.
I've done a couple, not too many. But he asks, what are some of the general heuristics, besides things that I know you've talked about, like sample size, p-values, and blindedness of the study? What are the general heuristics you use to evaluate them? And how does one evaluate the reference of a journal in an area in which they are not themselves experts? So given that I am an expert in effectively nothing real, I'm going to throw this over to you guys who spend a lot more time looking at studies. What do you look for? What are the hallmarks of a study? What sort of stuff do you look for? How do you know what passes a sniff test and what has a bit of an unusual order to it?
Well, your pre-existing biases help an awful lot.
Good. That's
a good way to get in there early with a motivated reasoning.
Lesson number one.
A study you're trying to tear down is much easier to tear down than a study you really want to believe in, because it turns out that's what motivated reasoning is.
Yeah. Lesson number one, know your conclusion before you go in. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
No, the lesson is out of there is try not to do that. Be aware that it's, you're going to find a flaw in a study if you're really looking for one.
Yeah. Or even good studies are filled with flaws.
Yeah. But I think Mason's covered the basics, the kind of things I look for as a kind of lay scientist. The things that I would look for are things like marginal p-values for terrible sample size, for broken blinding. You kind of read through the paper, and it's quite a difficult thing to do because it's quite often written in quite dense jargon. And if you're not an expert in the field, and I'm not an expert in any medical field, including the placebo effect, it's a...
Isn't the definition of an expert somebody who's just spent a really long time doing something?
I don't know what the legal definition of an expert is. But it's those are the kind of things that I would look for as someone who doesn't really have a deep understanding of the domain. And in the event that it's something that I feel is completely outside of my ken, if you like, I will just back off and say, okay, you know what, I'll look at something else because I don't know enough about this, and I recognise I don't know enough about this to actually hang a fucking lantern on my opinion.
Yep.
And make a big deal of it. So we'll probably get a more useful answer out of Alice, who actually is a scientist, who actually has expertise in things. I mean, I could quite happily tear down a paper about JavaScript, but
I'm not sure you will get a better answer from me, because the real answer is it depends on the paper. It is different based on every paper, and so I think, other than the things that we've said before, p-values and numbers of patients and things like that. When it comes to most studies, it's a case of reading what they think that they're saying and trying to see if that's what they've actually said. And sometimes it's really obvious if they're missing something. If they've said, I kind of always say to lay people, the best thing you can do is to start with the abstract, because that's a summary of what they think that they've found. That's what they think the relevance of their paper is. That's what they think is important about their paper. I personally, as an academic, I would then always go straight to the results, because then I can read them and interpret them without the bias of the author. If you're not an expert in that area, then that's going to be really difficult, because you don't have the context necessarily to interpret that in. So I would say then go to the discussion, and again, to see what they're saying that their results say. And then often you can kind of go back to the results and look at the headings and just try and match everything up and make sure that what they're saying is what their data, what they're actually saying that their data says in the two separate areas. Because a lot of the time, a bad paper is badly interpreted. A lot of the time, you can see the gaps in that paper just by seeing that, well, the author says they've done this, but I can't see any evidence that they've actually done that. I can't see, even just from the headings of their results, I can't see that they've actually looked at that data or answered that question. And you can often see massive gaps.
Could you be more specific, maybe? Because obviously you look at, when Mike looks at studies, it's does this particular alternative medical intervention study show what it's about. But yours are a bit more nuanced than that, because you're looking at real research that may actually be legit and other bits that may not, and studies that may be legit but where elements aren't right. So have you come across somewhere you're like, actually, I remember this bit, without sort of naming and shaming academics?
I complain a lot about papers. There's terrible examples of things that happen in papers in the kind of fields that I work in. But I think in terms of things that skeptics are going to be interested in, I think a lot of the papers I look at are maybe not an alternative therapy as such, but here's some science and we think it'll work to do this. And that's the case where it is, I'm being really vague here, Anna. Those are the cases where people will make bigger claims than their data actually shows. And that's the most important thing to try and understand, is what the authors say that their data shows. Often I look at papers and will write a list of what their results show, which you get from the results section. The results section of a paper shouldn't have any conclusions of what that means. In theory, the results section of a paper should just be a list of what they found in the most unbiased way possible. Here's the experiment we did, and here's what we found. And then in the discussion, they can discuss the implication of that and what that means in the wider scope of the literature, or the wider scope of the disease itself that they're trying to treat, or whatever. If you can look at their results, write down a list of what they claim to have shown, and then look at their discussion and work out what they think that they've shown, usually a bad paper will mismatch those. It will say, well, we found this and therefore massive sweeping conclusion, which doesn't actually fit to what their results have actually shown. And that's the simplest way to really figure out whether the paper's much cop is actually what the authors think that they've shown. And sometimes it is a case, and we've talked about it on the show before, where I've gone and looked at a paper and said, actually, this is a pretty decent paper. It just doesn't show what the author or the media thinks it shows. It's not a cure for cancer. It's an interesting avenue to follow up.
Watch out for overstatement. I mean, I think he'd named a lot of the things. Mason had named a lot of the things that were good to look out for generally, but watching out for overstatement. And also, I suppose, often you see kind of papers where there'll be a line in there that says that data, there wasn't enough data to draw a firm conclusion.
Yeah.
More studies are needed. And then somewhere else, it'll be interpreted as this has shown such and such and such, when you actually look at that line and it's still in there.
The biggest sweeping statements will be in the abstract. The abstract, they're trying to sell the paper. They're trying to express it in the boldest statement, in the boldest way that they can. So usually by comparing the abstract and the discussion, you can usually get a feel for whether they're overstating it a bit.
Okay, so Mason, I hope that kind of answers your question there. Other people, keep your questions coming in, which is podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk.
Yeah, you're looking at me for confirmation, Marsh, as if it's not been the same email address literally since day one.
I was looking at you to show off the fact that I knew that without even thinking, that it was just tripping off my tongue after just this short 8 years or whatever, however the hell we've been going. The other thing is, I would point out, we don't mention this very often, but if you like the stuff that we do, you are allowed to kind of throw us some dollars on Patreon and stuff, and it just
true.
supports all of the shows that we do. So this, the monthly Be Reasonable, Incredulous, I think there's an episode of that coming up soon too. So you can do that at patreon.com/Mersey Skeptics.
That's right.
And then the only other thing to talk about probably is QED, Mike. QED, which is, the tickets for QED are out now.
QED tickets are now on sale, priced £109 or £75 if you're a student or if you're under 18. And we also announced our first trench of speakers.
We have.
They look good so far.
We've got Helen Chersky, who is obviously fantastic.
I'm obsessed with her. She's amazing. She's so excitable about science. It's brilliant. I like people who get excited by things.
Well, she does a lot of stuff around. She does the physics of bubbles and oceanography.
She's a bubbleologist.
But she also does like the physics of everyday life. And I saw her do a really interesting series, I think it was on BBC, where she was looking at the engineering of traditionally female pursuits and how effectively using a sewing machine is quite an advanced engineering thing, but has never been considered that. And so the way that we've always historically throughout society assumed that women can't do things like science and engineering, but then also ascribe these very that's women's work, and they fundamentally rely on understandings
science
of kind of chemistry and things for cookery. So she's done some really interesting stuff, and she was great last time she spoke at QED.
She was really good at QED last time.
She did QED for us about 3 years ago.
I think it was about 3 years ago.
She took part in our infamous debate between.
Well, I think she very much observed. I think she was there to be taken part, but I think Robin and Brendan O'Neill very much.
They ended up monopolising that conversation.
I think
between
it was
the two of them
a little monopolised from the two of them.
Yeah.
Then we got David Gorski.
David Gorski, who listeners might know better as Aurak, his quasi pseudonym, because basically everyone knows it's David Gorski.
That's true.
He's an oncologist specialising in breast cancer. He writes for Science-Based Medicine. He's managing editor of Science-Based Medicine.
Gets a lot of shit from anti-vax people, and Mike Adams once asked for him to be killed.
Recently had a very public fight with William Shatner.
He did have a public fight with William Shatner.
Of all people on Twitter. Because
Why?
Well, William Shatner was talking about something. I don't remember quite what it was. Or I think it was autism. I think it might have been William Shatner was supporting an autism charity, but it was a woo autism charity.
Saw this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And David Gorski came in and kind of corrected him and said, this isn't a thing.
I didn't realise that was him.
Yeah.
William Shatner then Googled David Gorski. Top match of Google for David Gorski turns out to be a massive hit piece
by Natural News.
Natural News. And so William Shatner came back and shared to his 2.5 million followers. This is the guy David Gorski is.
Yeah.
With his massive hit piece. And this went back and forth for fucking ages. Shatner completely on the wrong side of the issue.
Yeah, he was terrible.
It oddly made me lose a terrific amount of respect for William Shatner.
He seemed to just dig his heels in further.
He really did, yeah. Which is a shame.
I agree. Next week we have is Emma McClure, our friend Emma McClure.
That'd be amazing.
Off of this podcast once and off of this podcast again in the future at some point, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Emma, who is a prison solicitor who has some of the most terrifying stories of anybody I've ever met about what it's like working in the prison system and some of the situations she comes across where it's her job to help out and things.
Yeah.
But she's going to be talking about forensic science and what happens when you misapply forensic science and the people who get caught up in the cogs of that machine. And it's one of my favourite skeptical talks that I've seen.
Yeah. Emma, also the composer of the Dr. Alice song.
Was the composer of the Dr. Alice song, that's true.
She composed the Dr. Alice song. We have to pay her royalties every time that episode is downloaded.
That is true. She gets a cut of our Patreon money. So, keep it in. Then we have Caroline Rance, who is an author. She runs thequackdoctor.com, and she wrote the book The Quack Doctor, Historical Remedies for All Your Ills, which is all about kind of health frauds throughout history and quackery throughout history, which I think is an interesting perspective on quackery. Often we have a lot of sort of current quackery or even kind of like the last 30 years of quackery getting to here, but it's normally very narrow focus. But there's going to be much more broader snake oil kind of look, I think. Then we've got Phil Scraton.
Phil Scraton, yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah, Emeritus Professor in the School of Law at Queen's University, Belfast. He was the author of the Hillsborough Report. So the actual he was one of the campaigners who for years pushed for a full inquest into the death of 96 Liverpool fans at the Hillsborough tragedy, a football tragedy, which was hugely then covered up by the police and the media and various others too. And it kind of was a genuine conspiracy, a genuine cover-up, which over the last kind of 30 years-ish has now been able to be unravelled and has ended in kind of justice or moving towards justice after a long, long road to get here. So I think it'd be really interesting to hear him talk about how a cover-up can be constructed and how you go about deconstructing a cover-up and working to try and figure out what's actually true when there's forces kind of working against you, really. Then you've got Kevin Senapathy.
Kevin Senapathy, yeah. And I first came across Kevin Senapathy because she covered the chiropractor says you can glue your labia together. Shut. Instead of having a period, just glue it shut. Just glue it shut. It's fine. A little bit of glue. So she covered that story for Forbes, and she effectively broke that story. And so I read some of her work, and it turns out this is what she does. She covers. She's quite a high-profile journalist covering woo, which is awesome. She seemed a great fit for what we were doing, specifically tackling myths on science and health and food and biotechnology.
Yeah, she wrote a book about the food babe. Shattering Vani Hari's glass house, the fear babe.
And she was featured in the Science Moms documentary as well, who we ran the trailer for that at the last QED.
We did.
I'm quite excited about that.
And then the last speaker we've announced so far is Simon Singh.
Never heard of him.
My boss at Good Thinking Society. So Simon's obviously done a huge amount of work. But the stuff he's going to specifically be talking about is how the Enigma code was cracked during World War II. And he'll have an actual live Enigma machine that he'll be there demonstrating exactly how it works and kind of what goes into it and how you go about unraveling that mystery. So that should be really interesting. And actually having a piece of history, an authentic piece of history with him will be fantastic.
Yeah. So that's the first batch of speakers we've got announced. We've got some very exciting speakers that we've got lined up that we're not quite ready to announce yet, but there's some very exciting people that are coming. £109, £75 if you're a student or if you're under 18. We've got a creche facility, so if you're a single parent or if you're not a single parent, if you're a pair of parents.
If you're a parent, basicly.
And you would like
to come along. If you're one of three parents, we're not limiting the number of parents.
Or a guardian.
Doesn't matter. Indeed, a guardian. Then you can register your kids at the creche, and we'll have professional people look after them while you enjoy QED.
That's true. So this is on the 14th to 15th of October, and your ticket gets you into that whole weekend on the evening entertainment. But also on the 13th of October, Friday the 13th of October, we have a Skeptic Camp event too. So we've got the whole weekend kind of covered.
Yeah.
So to get your tickets, go to qedcon.org, and we'll be talking about it lots more too, because this basically dominates our lives for the next 5 months every year, and we always get loads of listeners coming. So if you were a listener who's not been before and you thought, oh, I'd like to go, but I've not been before, you'll meet loads of other listeners. You'll meet lots of other people who are very happy to chat to you. So definitely come. It's cool.
So Liverpool Skeptics in the Pub is tonight. That's our social event. That's going to be in Dr. Duncan's from 8 p.m. So if you're in the Liverpool area, come along to that. I'm going to be there. Marsh, you going to be there?
I'll be there.
Alice, you going to be there? Mm-hmm. It's going to be a full house. Full house at Dr. Duncan's this evening from 8 o'clock. It's free. There's no subs to pay or anything. It's just a group of us out for a pint. So if you're interested, come along. It'll be fun.
You can really annoy both Mike and Marsh by referencing the date of the day, which is the 4th of May.
The 4th of May.
I think they'll get really... I think
The 4th of May.
4th of May. Okay.
We'll figure that one out.
There might be some kind of pun that we can make out of that name, but I can't think of one.
We'll figure something out.
Can't think of one at the
It'll
moment.
really annoy both of them if you mention it to them. So. Not that I'm condoning annoying either of them.
So that's this evening, if you're interested in coming on to that. Aside from that, I think that is all we have time for.
I think so.
All that remains then is for me to thank Marsh for coming along today.
Cheers.
And thank you to Alice.
Thank you.
We have been Skeptics with a K, and we will see you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society. For more information, visit our website www.merseysideskeptics.org.uk or email podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk.